Hey, 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 happy Sunday. Don't adjust your TV screens. This is a different location. I'm in bed. Happy Sunday. Happy December 1st. Happy from my bed. Apologies for not joining you guys last Sunday and without warning. Um, there were some personal surprises that happened over the weekend. Hey, my love, that happened last week, and I'm still recovering, which is why I am in bed and have been since Wednesday. Yes, since Wednesday. That's right. It's the first of the month. Um, it's December 1st, y'all. We have gone through 11 months. Oh my goodness. And we are almost done with this year. And I don't even know how to feel about it yet. I was going to write something on the calendar earlier and then realized, girl, you have to turn to December. It is December. Um, I'm grateful to have made it this far. I'm grateful for so many things. I'm grateful that I scheduled my therapy session this morning. Let me just recommend, if you are able to do it, have your therapy sessions on a Sunday. It will create um, a good week. Where I was yesterday versus where I am today is completely different. Even though I am still in bed, I managed to put a face on, I got eyebrows on, I managed to write some things down. I was so mentally, emotionally, and physically exhausted by the time I got home Wednesday afternoon. I had already known that I wasn't going to be participating in the Thanksgiving holiday. I knew that on Saturday, um, when all of that personal turmoil stuff started to brew up. I knew that Saturday, was planning to rest, but I didn't know how much I needed to rest. And I'm still feeling like rest is calling my name. So when we're done today, trust and believe I will be washing off the eyebrows. And there's nothing really else to do since I'm already in bed, but my body still is asking for rest. And I'm going to give my body what it's asking for. So apologies for last week. And I recognize that we only have five more of these. Five more of these. Um, I've already scheduled them out. I may have to reschedule um, one. Let me see if I can bring that up. I want to bring it up early so I don't forget. And of course, I forgot to get to load it before we started. There she is. So let me know when you guys can see our schedule for the next 5 weeks. So today is the first. So we'll be meditating on changes. You know, for those of you who love to try to control everything that you do, you know that change is something that we cannot control very much. We'll talk about that today. Next week, because I am not prepared to talk about it this week, next week we're going to talk about grief. So, because we've been talking about power all year, we have to talk about the grief that comes when you have to say, no more, so long, when you have to transition from things. And I don't think we always give ourselves permission to grieve what was. Um, Just because you are changing something, just because you are transforming from something, just because you are doing something new and different, does not mean that grief is not a part of that process. So we'll talk about that next week because, quite frankly, I am not strong enough to talk about it today. um, it's come up a lot for me, and for others, and I want to give voice to it. I want us to give voice to the grief that comes from, particularly when you are doing something good and grand, yet it no longer serves you. And you have to make that difficult choice of saying goodbye, of walking away, because you know your energy just has to go somewhere else. There is a grieving process that comes with that. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it too, because if we don't give the experiences that we are going through words, if we don't give them meaning, if we don't name it, claim it, and face it, it doesn't go away. It sits there. It sits there waiting to be recognized. And so it's going to come up in all different shapes and forms and manifestations. And I think we sometimes forget about that, and we want to know, why am I so upset? Why are things going the way they are? Because you're grieving. So we're going to talk about that next week on the 15th. I think this is the one that I'm going to change. I want to talk about the power of creation. However, last week we were supposed to talk about the power of community, so maybe I'll combine them. The creative power that can be found in community, the creative power that happens when we are in community. Many of us have an idea that creation only comes when we're by ourselves, when things are good and quiet. Have you ever experienced, I know I have, the creative power that comes when you are in a communal space? For those of you who remember when you were in school and you were given group projects, no one likes group projects. No one likes group projects. I know I didn't. I always wanted to, let me just do my project on my own. However, there is something magical that happens when you are in a communal space, when you are in community and creating together. You're either going to bring out the best in other people, or you might bring out the worst, which is something that we all need to have as part of the creative process. So maybe that's the one on the 15th. We'll change that to sound or to look like creative power in community. Okay. The 22nd, new beginnings. If you are going to commit to coming into your power, then you better commit to things being new. And I have said this for quite some time now. Changing your language around something that is new. I often will say, it's not hard, it's new, which oftentimes makes us resistant to do things new. If any one of us can remember um, the first day of school, particularly if it's a new school where you don't know anyone, first day on a job where you may not know anyone, first and new beginning, first dates, you know, new beginnings can be so filled with fear that it puts us in an energy of resistance, and we cling to the things of the past. So that can be a power struggle. And if we're going to talk about power and operating from our place of power, then we have to talk about what it feels like in the experience of doing something new, doing something unfamiliar, doing something risky, doing something scary. So we'll talk about that on the 22nd. And then on the 29th, we are going to talk about completion. I had no idea how important the process and ritual of completion really is. Because there are often times, particularly in my past, where I will start something and not finish. And then you get into a cycle of starting things and not finishing. And then you get into the habit of being excited about things and then no longer being excited about them and having to find or create something else to be excited about. And what usually will happen is there is a trail of things that are left uncompleted or incomplete. And so there is a significance of completion. There should be a significance of completion in everything that we do, where you feel like I said everything that I could think of and what I believe to be necessary, and now I am complete. When you can definitively say that I am done with something, when you can walk away and not walk away angry or walk away like I don't want to be bothered, but literally walk away feeling like I did what I came here to do. If there was an intention, and hopefully there is always an intention, if there was an intention in your mind when you started something and you said, I want this thing to be whatever it is that you desire it to be, and then you get to a place where you say, I did that and then some. I am complete with it. We have to honor that. And so a lot of these things are part of the human experience that we go through on a day to day basis that we don't always label, that we don't always define, but they need to be given some focus. And so that's how we're going to wrap up Power 25. Um, Today, as we talk about changes, and I didn't even um, do what I normally do because I'm not where I'm normally at. I'm normally in my office. And in my office, all of my books, all of my work, all of my binders full of knowledge and wisdom that I have either created myself or obtained from others. I don't have none of that. Only thing that I have is this great, beautiful mind and my great, beautiful heart. But as I was wrapping up my therapy session this morning, I kept feeling that there are so many changes that are going on in our world, and everything that you see externally is also a reflection or a mirror of what may be going on for you internally. It might look different, it may sound different, but we are all connected. So if you see, huge changes on the horizon in the world, trust that there will be true changes on the horizon within your internal world, your personal world. And because we are all going through so many changes, we got to talk about it. We don't always like to be the one that points things out. If you again remember from school, the kid that would point out, Miss So and so, you forgot to put the homework on the board, or Miss So and so, you forgot to collect our homework, or, Miss So and so, you didn't, give us any homework for the weekend. Nobody likes that kid because that kid was used to things being a particular way. And when they noticed that they weren't, they would raise their hand and be like, hey, 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 you got to talk about this. And so changes are going on all the time around us, within us. We don't always tell people. We don't always acknowledge them for ourselves. We don't always acknowledge them in others. I know we sometimes will make it a point that if we see something different about someone, we'll mention it like, hey, I noticed you changed your hair, or, ooh, I noticed, you got a different energy about you. How often are we doing that to ourselves, where there are these changes, no matter how subtle they may be? There may be these changes in your life, but you don't acknowledge them. You don't celebrate them, or you don't allow yourself the opportunity, because everything is an opportunity. You may not allow yourself the opportunity to say, hey, I used to do this, and now I'm doing something different. I used to cry every single time someone's name was mentioned, and now I'm not. Hey, I used to get upset or angry whenever I was asked to do a particular thing, and now I'm not. During my therapy, hey, Miss Giselle, how are you? During therapy this morning, I had to acknowledge a significant change in my behavior that I don't know if anybody else has noticed it, but I'm noticing it. And because I noticed it and I'm willing to acknowledge it, having someone say to me, "Well, how do you feel about that?" How often do we get that opportunity where something has changed in our lives and someone is asking us, "How do you feel about that?" So when my therapist asked me, "How do you feel about that?" it opened up a door for me to really explore, how do I feel about that? And so to give you an example, I'm explaining to my therapist, I recognize that last week I kept brushing things off or ignoring things that I absolutely would have paid attention to previously. I said, I noticed this change had come over me where I used to be more receptive to a particular question or a request or a sound that I'm no longer reacting. And so she said to me, "And how do you feel about that?" And when she asked me that question, it was an opportunity for me to say out loud, "I don't like that change. I don't like who that part of me. I don't want to be that person." Now, her follow up question was, "Well, do you need to be that person right now?" Which I never considered. So sometimes when we're going through a change, we don't have that opportunity to stop and ask ourselves, number one, how do you feel about what you now acknowledge? And number two, do you like it? Is it a good change? Or is it an indication that something else is going on? And so this week, as we go through the first week of December, we've had 11 months of experiences that have gone on in our lives. Do you notice a change? Do you notice a change about the way you think? Do you notice a change about the way you feel? Do you notice a change about the way you're reacting to things? Are you willing to acknowledge, yeah, I have changed significantly over the past 11 months? Are you willing to say and identify and outline, I used to have more patience, but now I don't? Or I have more patience now than I think I did in the beginning of the year. Are you willing to acknowledge some of the changes that are going on for you personally? Because the other thing that can happen is we're so focused on all the changes that are going on externally, we're not noticing the changes that are going on within ourselves. Maybe you have a change in perception of things. Maybe you're not as trusting as you feel like you might have been earlier this year. Whatever the change is for you, maybe you're more fearful. I can remember, and because it was a significant eye opening statement, I can remember years ago, and when I say years ago, it's probably over 20 years ago. I was working in a place and there was a custodian who he was the quietest custodian I think I've ever seen in my life. That man would sweep and mop and I wouldn't even recognize, his presence. I could be in the hallway with him and he would say hello and then I would jump. And so we had this common experience that every time he would say hello to me, I would jump. And it was because he was a quiet presence. He didn't make a lot of noise. He kind of knew how to stay in the background. But this particular day, he was near my office door and I still didn't acknowledge his presence. And so when I kind of turned the corner, I jumped. And I remember him saying to me, he's like, "Your life is not right." And I was like, what are you talking about? He said, "You're so jumpy. You just jump all the time. Every time I see you, if someone goes to speak to you, you're jumpy." He said, "As if you don't recognize that there are other people in the world." And I remember at that particular time, I was going through a horrible time. And when he said that, it clicked for me, like, yeah, I have been moving and operating like I'm the only person in the world and that I'm shocked and surprised when I see other people. And I never forgot that. And so every single time someone says, um, every time I jump when someone walks into a room, I think about that. It's like, is this one of those moments where you're so in tune to what you're doing and all self-absorbed that you're not acknowledging that you exist with other people? That stuck with me so much so that I'm mindful when it happens. And it's an indication to me you need to reconnect to the world that you live in where other people exist and other things are going on. And you might be missing out on something because you're so self absorbed and you're so focused. And so that was a change that someone else acknowledged in me that I now acknowledge in myself. And so asking yourself those kind of questions. What changes have I seen over the course of this year? Or maybe over the course of the past 2 years? Or what am I now doing that I can absolutely see as a change? And how do I feel about it? If you want to comment and share in the comments, you can. We are all family here, whether you are watching live or on the replay. You never know when something you say may trigger a thought or a feeling for someone else. Um, yeah, it took this gentleman all those years ago to shine that mirror on me. Like, yeah, I can become so self absorbed because I'm so focused on perhaps perfection. I'm so focused on getting things right. I keep telling myself that I gotta focus, gotta focus, gotta focus, gotta focus. And I recognize um it's primarily in those moments when I'm overwhelmed or when I'm stressed out. It's like, let me create a bubble where only I exist so that I have to deal with my own thoughts and but that's not realistic. We are coexisting with millions of people, whether we see a million of people on a day or not. We never really see a million people, I don't think, in our lifetimes. Maybe we do. I don't know. But we are coexisting with one another. And yet we have learned, as part of the human experience, to kind of silo ourselves and become so self absorbed that we forget there are other people around us. I wrote something down the other day uh, because I recognized, as one of these personal things that I'm grieving, is that as we are learning and as we are growing, we are doing it in relation with other people who are also learning and who are also growing. And sometimes we can become so self absorbed in our own stuff that we forget everybody has stuff. Just as I am changing, and I feel like, as I said to my therapist earlier today, I'm dealing with about 10 things that I'm grieving all at once. And it feels like they're pulling me in 20 different directions, 20 different emotions, 20 different million thoughts. Like, so much is going on. But how often am I acknowledging that the same thing may be, or something greater might be happening to someone else? Particularly when it looks as if we got it all together. Those of us who have chosen to live a portion of our lives in front of other people. We're all living in front of other people, but some of us have chosen to share parts of who we are with other people, but they don't see the other stuff. If any single one of us, do y'all remember that movie, The Truman Show, where there was a baby that was born just for a TV show, for other people to watch this baby grow up, and everything around him was fabricated? There are times when I feel like, am I on a Truman Show? Like, are these experiences that I'm going through, were they created and crafted for me so that other people can watch them and get some form of entertainment? In some regard, we are all living that life, whether we know it or not. As we interact and learn and grow, we are doing it in relation to other people who are also doing it. So we're all changing at all times, in different ways, in different, intensities. And sometimes we are so stuck in here, we forget about not just our physical vision, but our spiritual vision, our energetic vision. Like, whew, it's a lot to process. And I know for me, I'm like, I'm just trying to deal with my stuff. We're all trying to deal with stuff. We are all trying to deal with the change that happens on a daily basis, where we have to figure out, how do I feel about this? How do I think about this? How am I going to react to this? And as those of us who are really considering operating from a place of power with intention, and operating from a place of power with intention means I can't act like I don't know. I can't act like, I haven't been doing this personal development work and hopefully it is to bring about some type of change. Doesn't mean that there's something wrong with us, doesn't mean that we, have to make these drastic decisions in our life. But if there is a part of your life that you are not completely satisfied with, wouldn't that offer the opportunity for you to change it? Prior to me getting off my therapy call this morning, my therapist was like, okay, what's the plan? Because I'm telling her what I'm about to do, the changes that I'm about to make in my life. She's like, what's the plan? I said, considering I'm a coach and I help other people plan, I have never operated from a space of planning. I move based upon emotion and instinct. I know that about myself. Doesn't mean that I don't create a plan, but I'm not one of those kind of people who will say, okay, in 90 days, I'm going to do this. In 30 days, I'm going to do that. The plan is clear. It may not always have a begin date or an end date. And I know for those of us who learned about the SMART goals, the SMART goals, you have to be able to measure, you have to be able to, make sure there's a beginning date and an end date. I don't always operate that way for myself, even when I'm doing it for others. And she's like, well, there's got to be something. I said, there's always structure. There is always structure. There may not be any other way for anyone else to say, okay, this is where Yolanda is in her plan. However, a plan is a good thing to have, particularly when there is a change that you have control over. Some changes we don't, some changes we do. If you have control over a particular change in your life, then creating a structured plan would be helpful. Oh, I'm so grateful you know what I mean. Yeah, the rigid goals just don't work for me. I think it's also because of me being a fire sign. Don't tell me what to do. Like if someone says, which is interesting because I will give dates to other people because I know it's helpful for other people. So if, I'm working with someone and they say to me through our conversation, I really need to know how long this is going to take. Okay, we can absolutely come up with a date. For me, if someone says I need this done in 2 weeks, that sounds like a challenge to me. I'm going to try to do it in 2 hours. So, that just sounds like you're testing me. If someone says I need this in 2 hours, I'm going to try to do it in 20 minutes. So when I am creating structure for myself, it doesn't necessarily have a begin date and an end date. I might have an idea of how long something is going to take me, but yeah, rigid does not work for me. And so, with all of us changing, sometimes rapidly, sometimes the change is so subtle you don't even notice it, but it is always happening. Change is always happening. Some of it we control, some of it we don't control. The things that we don't control will sometimes push us, push us into changing. If any single one of us were to receive a phone call in the next 5 minutes that was life altering, we would have to shift. We might be doing it with pulling our hair out and dragging our fingernails across the ground. But you all know what I'm talking about when we get those things that we have no control over that come into our life and then change everything. Some of us do very, very well with change. Some of us are a little bit more flexible than others. But we are all, every single one of us on a daily basis, having to change and navigate and almost be like rubber, trying to figure out how to make it from the beginning of the day to the end of the day. That is part of being human. Some of us have been bear witness to what happens when we are so rigid and just cannot operate under change. I've seen it happen. You ask someone to do one thing differently, and it's like all is lost. And sometimes that is just based upon the way our brains work and the way we process information. Doesn't mean we're right, doesn't mean there's something wrong with us. If you have to have things on a schedule, um, I am the mother of 4 children who all operate differently. And I always say to myself, you 4 grew up in the same household, but you had different experiences and they just operate differently. So, for those of us who are challenged when things that are beyond our control come into our lives and change the way that we're doing things, we have got to figure out, how do I operate under that? How do I operate under that? My therapist helped me earlier when she asked me, okay, this changes that you are doing, how do you feel about them? And do you need to be this particular person for this amount of time to get through what you need to get through? Great questions. Wonderful questions. So that I'm not feeling bad about myself and the changes that I have to make. Because we talked about one of the things that comes up when change is imminent is guilt. Oh my goodness. Particularly when the change or the thing that you feel like you need to do is a good thing. Like, I have some really great and wonderful things going on in my life, yet they are no longer serving me. And I have to change them. And that can feel like I, I don't want to, but it's necessary in order for me to grow and to be the version of me that I am the happiest with. They have to happen. You know what? That the ritual piece, we're going to talk about that in turn when we get to completion. Because part of completion, again, it is a ritual. What do you do when you know you're coming to the end of something? Now, we're not going to talk about that until, what is that, the 29th. But if you are going to define where your power comes from, then you should also be able to define how you finish things. Okay? So, yes, rites of passage. Oh my goodness. Those don't just happen when we're young. The rites of passage for me, I'm going to say it happens every time I get to a particular place in my life. It feels like a rite of passage. I have been thinking a lot about my mother over the past couple of weeks. And what would she say about this choice in my life? What would she say about that choice in my life? And also, how would she support me through um, particular changes? Because the one thing that I knew that I can count on with my mother is that if there was something that I was going through or something that I needed to experience, she didn't feel the need to disrupt it. I knew she was there to support me, but she wouldn't feel the need to move all of the pieces on the chessboard for me. And that is an invaluable lesson to give to someone that you love. that I'm not going to disrupt your process. I'm not going to just do everything for you. I'm not going to just, you know, try to manipulate the situation so that you win. I'm going to be here so that you can see what happens, that even if you don't think you win, you're still loved, you're still supported, you're still a good person. And so as I've been thinking so much about her and how do I mother myself when I don't have a mother, it's you have to do something that you didn't know you were going to have to do, that you didn't really plan for, but it's necessary for your growth. Are you going to be able to go through it knowing that you might trip, you might fall down, you may not be successful the first time, the second time, the third time, but that doesn't mean you're a bad person. You're still loved and you're still an amazing girl. Can you do that for yourself, Yolanda? Those are some of the type of things that we also need to talk about when we're going through change. What is it that I need in order to do this transition? Who do I need to have around me so that as I go through this change, I don't lose my mind? All of these questions that we ask ourselves or that we should be asking ourselves, and I don't very often say the word should, but in order to support ourselves mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and physically, we have to ask those kind of questions. Who do I need on my team? Whew. As I'm about to make a huge transition in my life, maybe we're going to stop doing something and start something else. Maybe we're about to risk it all, put in all of our chips, and say, okay, I'm going to start this new venture in the new year. Or I'm going to end something that was a staple in my life in the new year because you know it's coming. We love the ritual of resolutions in the new year. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And you're going to all start, we're all probably starting to see already how is this year for you? And how is next year going to be different? What are the goals for 2025? Or I'm no longer doing this in the new year and I'm no longer going to be friends with these people. Or I'm no, this time of year brings up all of that kind of stuff. So, who do you need or what do you need around you as this change is coming about? For those of us who are still in the United States of America, we got a big change coming up next month. We think we've been here before, and in some ways we have, but it's going to feel like Dorothy's house in The Wizard of Oz, just spinning up in the air, waiting to land, and we don't know if when we land, somebody gonna be under the house. We have no idea. We really have no idea what 2025 is going to look like in the United States of America. But in our own united state of me and your united state of you, can you think of who do I need to have or what do I need to have around me so that I feel grounded, so that as I go through these changes, I don't lose my mind. Again, if you can do it, I would recommend therapy on a Sunday. This is the first time I had a session on a Sunday. And I'm like, you know what? If this is the way that I can start my week, sign me up. Um, Sign me up because it really is my opportunity to let everything out. Now, I only have an hour, but trust me, we make the most of that hour where I feel like I cannot go into another week. I cannot go into, you know, another week experiencing things the way that I did the previous week or the week before that. What support me in clearing all of that out so that I have more clarity of what it is that I need to do. And I think that might even be something that I implement in my practice, in my coaching business, to have sessions on Sundays so we can set a plan up for the upcoming week. Only because for many of us, our week consists of working from Monday through Friday. And for many of us, that's where a lot of our stressors come from. So that might be a change that I see in the new year. That Sunday is the day that I do my sessions with my clients, because I really want people, I don't want anyone to feel lost by the time you get to Wednesday, which is exactly how I felt last week. I was like, I don't know if I'm going to make it. I don't know if I'm going to make it till Friday. And then, halfway through the week, we start making these choices and changes in our head that are based upon frustration and anger and fear, instead of coming from a powerful place of um I'm good. I'm good. Ooh, my love. You have to do a self-assessment every 30 days and pick goals. Again, for those that it works for, great. That's not how I can operate, but what I have set up with my therapist is that every time before we end, we come up with a goal, and then we talk about my progress the next week. And so I have goals. I don't yeah, I have goals for the week. And sometimes they change depending upon the type of week that I've had. But we don't forget them. At least I don't forget them because I write them down. But I like that. Doing a self assessment every 30 days. Um, so with my coaching clients in the past, I recognize I was extremely rigid. And for those of you who may have coached with me, you might say, "Oh no, you weren't." Oh yeah, I was. Um, there were there was homework, and there was things that I expected to be done in a week. Um, I'm not as rigid as I used to be, because I recognize life is not that way. But I'm always writing down what the intention is and what the goal is, the overall goal. So we have overall goals that we create together, and it's my responsibility to stay on track. Just like a basketball coach or a football coach is like, okay, what's the overall goal for our team this week, or based upon where we find ourselves? Um, so as we are going through the week, as we continue to go through the end of this year, we're on day one, and I know those days are going to fly by. And I know that all of us are going to have decisions that we need to make that may not be easy to make. Decisions that we need to make that are not easy, particularly when we are either benefiting from those things, or it seems like everything's good. And if everything is good and you don't feel the need to make a change, then more power to you. Continue to do what it is that you are doing. But if you are 100% honest with yourself and you're like, I'm comfortable, things seem to be okay, and okay is not good enough for you, and you know you have to make some changes, and you know you don't want to make those changes, then support yourself in the best way you know how, by asking yourself those types of questions. What is it that I need to support me? Who's on my team? What is the most graceful way for me to end whatever it is that I need to end? What is, how am I going to feel about it? Am I okay with it? And I think for me, I don't know for you, one of the hardest things when I know I have to make a decision that needs to be made is when I'm not okay with it. So I have a choice that I have to make and I'm not okay with it, but I know it has to happen. It would be similar to if I went to the doctor and the doctor said, "Okay, you have to have this test done." And I'm like, "Well, I don't like it and I don't want to do it, but I know in order for me to be better, it's an unnecessary, I don't even want to say evil. It's an unnecessary thing. It's a necessary thing that I have to do." How do you push through that? What works for you? What didn't work in the past? Because I know there have been times when I was faced with something and I punked out. I was just like, you know what? When it came time to say or to do what I needed to do, I didn't do it. And I just kind of waited and sat back and waited for life to kind of just unfold and tell me what I needed to do. And that's not living from a place of power when you're just sitting back and waiting for life to tell you what to do when you're not making any choices. You're just waiting for life to do what it does. And then you'll react or then you'll respond. That is not operating from a place of power, even if sometimes you have to do that. I don't want to dismiss anyone's personal experience because sometimes that's where you're at, where you can't make a choice and you're just going to wait to see what happens and then you'll respond accordingly. And if that is where you are, then as I've said before, I would offer to you to find a way to get some support. It could be from your family, it could be from your friends, but for me, someone whose only vested interest in me doing well is based upon a neutrality, right? And to me, that's my therapist at this point. Whereas I love my family, I love my friends, I love the people that love me, but I also know that that comes with a measure of I'm going to take my cues from you, Yolanda, and I'll do whatever it is that you want me to do. That's not always the wisest decision for me because in those moments when I am not my strongest self, not my most authentic self, I can justify anything. I'm a human. We're masters at that. We are masters at justifying particular things even if it's not good for us. We can come up with a reason why we have to do what it is that we have to do. I know I need someone that's going to hold me accountable. That right now that's my therapist. She'll listen to me, but she's going to ask me the hard question like, that's not what you said," or "that doesn't sound like the version of you that you said you wanted to be." She's going to ask me questions like, "Well, how do you feel about that?" I had to also admit to her today that my response to something um, was shocking. I got some news the other day, and my response to it shocked me, and I still don't feel bad about it. I said if I had heard anyone respond in the way that I responded, I would gasp. I said I'm really shocked that that level of anger was living in my body. And she's like, "Well, who says that you can't be angry?" And it was very freeing. I appreciate that from her. It wasn't judgmental. I guess that's what I'm getting to. Like, if you are making changes in your life, having people who surround you that are non-judgmental but also will hold you accountable is essential. And that's not easy to come by. As I said, our friends, our family, they love us. Sometimes they will offer up judgment, but sometimes they won't hold us accountable. They just want to love us. And sometimes loving us is whatever it is you say, whatever it is you want. I'm grateful that my therapist doesn't let me get away with that. She's not going to judge me for what I say or what I do, but she's also still, has that balance of, well, let me go back to, our session 2 or 3 weeks ago where you said this. Okay, good therapist. I appreciate you. That's what a good therapist does. That's what a good coach does. So now, wait a minute, because I keep notes, I keep receipts. I'm going to get me a t shirt that says, I keep receipts. There may be one that already exists. If someone wants to do one, as I said before, please just make me a t shirt that says, I keep receipts, because Lord knows I keep receipts. Um, but we have to. If you are going to go through a change, you want to be surrounded with non judgmental energy that also will hold you accountable, that will also, you know, they on for the roller coaster that might be coming up. And many of us are about to go through a roller coaster, if you haven't already been on the roller coaster season, where it feels like one day you're up, one day you're down. One day you know exactly what you want to do, the next day you don't. Sometimes it's not even a day, it's within an hour. You can wake up in the morning feeling like, I am firing on all cylinders. By 2 o'clock, those cylinders have popped, they have broken, and you just want to go home and crawl into bed. And you're thinking to yourself, what the heck is going on with me? I go back to my original statement. Every single person on the planet is changing, even if you don't see it, even if you are not a witness to it. Every single one of us is going through a change all at the same time. And just like I wrote down the other day when I was trying to figure out, why are people being the way they are being? Because we all learn as we are growing and learning. We happen to be doing it when we are in relation with other people who are also learning and growing. And sometimes there's a synchronized energy where we're on the same page, on the same plane, and sometimes we are not. It doesn't always mean that people don't love you, or people are not supportive of you, or people are not there for you. It means we are all changing. We are all trying to process all of this good, gracious information that's being thrown at us. And some of us, in an attempt to process that information, are shutting all the way down. And we don't want to deal because it's so much. As I was going through my therapy session this morning, I kept listing, I'm grieving from this, I'm grieving from that, I feel guilty about this, I feel guilty about that, I'm excited about this. And she's like, yeah, that's a lot. But I'm not alone in that. It's not just me. It's you, the person you're sitting next to, the person that you're going to have an issue with tomorrow, the person that you're going to fall into their arms. Every single one of us changing. And we wish that it was gentle. We wish that it was, peaceful. If you've never had the experience, and for those of us who have, you'll know what I'm talking about in a minute. If you've never had the experience of witnessing, and maybe I'm sure there is a video, a time lapse video that you could probably Google and watch. The experience of actually watching um, caterpillars changing. It's violent. Like we've had them in the child care center. It is a bloody mess. And I don't even know if it's a good thing for young children who may not be able to process all of that to witness. I was aghast. I was like, this is pretty violent. It's not, like they make it in movies and cartoons where the what the heck is it? The the worm, whatever it's called. I can't even think of caterpillar, where the caterpillar just kind of snuggles up to a leaf or a tree and then all of a sudden starts to wrap this cocoon around and then poof, out comes a butterfly. It is a mess. It is very, very messy. Um, and we could all feel like that. That is very, very messy. Becoming the version of yourself that you desire to be is messy, and it can feel bloody, and it can feel like I'm not going to make it through. And one of the things that, happened this year when we did our butterfly transformation, they didn't all make it. And how do you explain that to a 2-year-old? They can see the caterpillars, they're not really counting, but they can see that there were X amount of caterpillars and there might have been one butterfly out of the bunch. It's like, well, what happened to all the other caterpillars? They didn't make it because transformation is hard. Transformation is uncertain. Transformation may mean that you don't make it into the version that you thought you were going to make it into, which is why so many of us are resistant to change. And so, as we are preparing, for many of us, this whole year has been about change. One of the revelations that I had to make this morning was if I look over 2024, I have been, hey, good afternoon. If I look over my personal 2024, I have been more unhappy than I have been happy. And I'm not expecting anything in that regard. Like, I long gave up the desire to always be happy because I know it's not realistic. And for me, happy is moment by moment, moment by moment. But if I had to look at the totality of this year, there have been more moments of sadness than there have been than I'm okay with. Let me say that. Then I'm okay with. 2023 did not look that way. And 2025 better not look that way, either. But I am it makes complete sense to me why there has been so much sadness this year. Whew, because I said I want to be something completely different. I remember saying that at the beginning of this year. I want to be so unrecognizable. I want to be so vastly different. And doesn't mean that anything was wrong because 2023 Yolanda was, but I saw that and was like, and I want more. I want something greater. And I realize that when we ask for something greater than who we were, has to change. And that doesn't always feel good. I am so glad to know that I'm not alone in that. And it doesn't mean that this was a horrible year, that this was a sad year. Yeah, the year of discovery. I recognize that there was more sadness this year. And it could be for you, Erica, and maybe for others, is that our perception is different. It could be that we're paying attention to things in ways that we may not have been paying attention to. It could be a lot of things. But if I had to assess, and I do like to do that, I do like to assess, even though I move off of instinct and emotion, I'm going to check in What's going for you, Yolanda? How are things? If I had to assess 2024, as a matter of fact, I'm looking at I wish I could turn my camera around and show y'all. I'm looking at a post, not a poster, a post-it that I have on my wall that says 2024. It has my three spiritual principles. And then underneath that, it says the principles. Some of the principles are forgiveness, discipline, boundaries, and choices. So if that's what I was focusing on this year, it should not be a shock or surprise that a lot of times this year I have been sad. If I say I'm going to forgive, I got to think about the things that I'm, offering up forgiveness for. If I say I'm going to create more discipline, then that means saying no to some things that I love doing. If I say that I'm going to create more boundaries and that I'm going to be more honoring my choices, that means being someone completely different. That means change. And that means grieving. We'll talk about that next week. I am grieving the me that I was on the way to becoming the me that I say that I want to be. Whew. And it feels heavy. It's supposed to, because this is your life. This isn't a story on TV or in a book. This is your personal life. It should not come as a shock or surprise that it's heavy because it's meaningful. And it is also a measure of everything that you've gone through, not just this past year. Child, I'm still, when I had to admit to my therapist today that I was shocked by my response to something, that something happened over 30 years ago. Wait a minute, not even 30, 40 years ago. Jeez Louise. Happened over 40 years ago. 40 years of me dealing with something and not recognizing just how angry I was about it when someone gave me information about an individual that I had an experience with 40 years ago. And when it came out of my mouth, I was like, good gravy. And I told my therapist, let's put a pin in that because we're going to need to go there. And so when you have asked the universe for anything, it's going to give you what you want. And so, how dare I ask for a different version of me and think that it was going to come lightly? How dare I ask to heal from some things that have greatly wounded me and to think that that was going to come lightly? Anyone who has ever had to heal from something physical, you know the cost of healing. If you had a break in a bone, if you had a strain in a muscle, if you pulled a tendon, baby, if you broke a nail, if you got a paper cut, we all know the price of healing and what happens typically, that it feels worse before it feels better. I've had injuries that have taken longer than a year to heal. For those of you, as we come into the cold season here on the East Coast, and my daughter can attest to this, when I broke my coccyx bone, which is your tailbone. Let me tell, there's nothing you can do for that. They can't put a cast on your tailbone. I want to say it took more than a year to heal, and it was painful. And I kept thinking, isn't there something we can do? And they're like, that is a bone that is so deeply embedded in your body. What do you think we could do other than give you painkills and eh, pain pills? And ain't nobody getting strung out on no pain pills over here. So had to endure it. For any single one of us that have had a physical issue, and for many of us, we have some physical issues that will never heal completely. It's a painful process. Change can be a painful process. One thing that we can do that is powerful to do is to surround ourselves with the support that we need as we are changing. And sometimes that means making very, very difficult decisions. Um, Saying, you know what, I'm going through this huge change and I can't afford to have any distractions. And this thing that I love so much has now become a distraction. It's a delightful distraction. It gives me what I need in that moment, but it also keeps me from becoming the version of me that I desire to be. And I know in 2025, I want to become the most powerful version of me that I've ever been. That's a tall order. That's a large order. And as soon as those words left my lips, I hear in the back of my head, uh-oh, because the universe is always listening. What did Yolanda just say? She wants to be the most powerful version of herself? Woo! I know what that means. I know what that means, but I also know and I am grateful for. I am so, so grateful for the knowledge that I don't have to do it alone, that I'm going to always be supported, that even when I don't know what to do or to say or how to be, I am wrapped in a cocoon of love and support. One of the things we were talking about earlier, when we can become so self-absorbed in our own thoughts and our own emotions, we will miss out the times when the universe, the divine, God, however you define it, is absolutely sending loving energy our way. I am grateful that in the midst of challenging times, I still have the ability to acknowledge God is sending me love. It comes from my children. It absolutely comes from my granddaughter. It even comes from these animals running all over my house when I don't want to be bothered. And they're like, we don't care if you got a nasty attitude. We still want to curl up and be next to you. We don't care if you've been ignoring us for 2 days. We still want to curl up next to you. And even when I'm in the midst of a bout of frustration about a current experience, I will hear a child laugh, or one of the parents will say, I'm so glad you're here. Or, one of my coworkers will say, Miss Yolanda, I need you. All of those things are presented to us as evidence that we are loved and we are supported. So please, if you are in the midst of a year of discovery where things are unfolding and perhaps they are more challenging than you expected them to be, please do not ignore or miss the love that comes your way, whether it's through this voice, other voices, and be mindful of when you are that voice for someone else. Because again, we are all learning and growing. Whew. And we happen to be doing it in relation with one another. And hopefully that'll also allow us to have more compassion for ourselves and for others when people are out of sorts, when people are not operating in the way in which you know them to operate. I know my family is like, what's going on with that lady? She is not behaving in the way that we know her to behave because I'm changing and I'm grieving and I am learning to do things differently, and I'm figuring out how I feel about particular things and what is still living within me. All of this stuff is happening not just for me but for you too. And so I hope that we will all have grace for one another in these next 31 days and beyond. And perhaps it's a prayer that we, offer ourselves every single day we get up. God, let me have grace for myself and for others today. Because I know that we are all changing. I know that we are experiencing things that maybe we haven't before, and we're unfamiliar with what we're faced with. And how do I respond? What do I say? How do I feel? How do I think? And how am I doing all of this and still being mindful of the day to day things that have to get done? God, let me have grace. If I cannot hold any other spiritual principle in my consciousness, let it be grace. And perhaps that is a good place for us to meditate on. Let's take some deep breaths, recognizing that that too is a change. Going from breath to breath, from inhale to exhale, you're changing. We don't know what we're breathing in. We could be breathing in the best oxygen that was ever created, and we could be breathing in some of the most toxic fumes that were ever created. We have no idea, but we still breathing. And let us just trust that whatever is going in my body, in my lungs, in every cell of my body, let it be there for my highest good. Let my lungs do what they were designed to do and filter out all of the things that are unnecessary for my growth and my healing. And let me put out the same. We are not just coexisting with one another, we are literally living for one another. Imagine if every living being on the planet, on this planet that we know of, decided to hold their breath all at the same time. What it would do to the ecosystem would have repercussions for generations to come. If we all just decided to start, God forbid, smoking cigarettes today, I mean, babies, everyone just started to just be extremely toxic, we wouldn't be able to survive. But if we all decided, hey, let us do what's good and great and wonderful for not just ourselves, but for one another. Let us clean up our living spaces. Let's, reduce our carbon footprint, all of the things that we can do. If we all decided to do that for 1 hour, that also would have long-standing effects. And in some ways, we can do that. We can do that with our consciousness. If we all just decide, I'm going to pray more, I'm going to meditate more, I'm going to make sure that the energy within my body is one of stability, one of wellness, not just for myself, but for all mankind. What if we decided to make that the vision for 2025? That I'm going to be the best version of me because it's the best version for the collective. Oh my gosh, wouldn't that be delicious? Instead of some of the things that we focus on and choose to do. And I really find it hard to believe that people wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to be the most evil force in the universe today. Like, that's my vision and mission for today. I'm sure there are people who do that. I just cannot wrap my head around anyone who's like, that's my plan. Um, and so I am thinking to create more grace for myself so that I can create grace for others. Because I recognize my grace for others was diminishing last week. Boy, I had no space. I had no space for compassion for just about anyone last week because it was low for me. Because I didn't have any for myself. I daggone sure didn't have any for anyone else. And so I'm grateful for grace. So let's meditate on that. Let's take a deep breath. Recognizing that our choice to do so, our choice to take deep breaths is not just good for us, but it's good for the collective because all that we are means that that is all that we are as a collective. If I choose to be great, if I choose to be good, if I choose to be patient, if I choose to be hmm, peaceful, then that's not just a choice I'm making for myself. Oh, divine, universal life force energy, called by many names, held in high regard, loving in all that you do, loving in all thy ways, to all beings, here and beyond. We are so grateful that you have brought us through this year and beyond, if that is your desire. And as your creations are continuing to change and multiply and transform and expand and do all of the things that have already been declared to be so, let us leave room, create space for grace in the midst of all of that change. Let me remind myself on a daily basis, on an hourly basis, or however frequent I need to, that I am a work in progress, a magnificent work in progress. And all great and beautiful creations take time, take a vision, take intention, take clarity. Even when sometimes I'm very unclear, there is no direction, and I'm very impatient. Hmm. Let me remember all of what I have experienced to come to this right now moment. And how, even in those times when I desired to give up, I was carried, I was dragged. Sometimes it feels like I was folded up like a piece of paper and put away, but I'm here. I am here. And I am preparing my way to go further. I am preparing myself in the best way that I know how in this moment by asking for grace, by giving it in return, by acknowledging grace is what brought me this far, that unfolded me, that allowed me to stand up straight, that allowed me to come to some conclusions and revelations about who I am and who I'm becoming, and still loving myself, regardless of what I see, what I hear, and what I uncover. And I'm so grateful for that, that I still have the ability to love me in the midst of finding out some things that I tried to hide from, that I tried to keep hidden consciously or unconsciously. For that, I am also grateful. That even in the midst of some revelation, some hard truths, some unkind thoughts that have possessed my mind for far too long, even in the midst of all of that, there is still something very lovable here. There is still something very worthy here. There is still something to be bragged about, to be proud of. Thank God for grace. Thank God for patience. Thank God for those moments where nothing makes sense, but everything is held together, even if I believe it is falling apart. I recognize there is a rhyme and a reason to all things, even when I can't keep the beat, even when I don't understand. There is an order, there is a process, even when I don't like it. There is divinity in all experiences, there is a sacredness to what we are witnessing. Even when we don't acknowledge it, it is still there. And for that, I am grateful. When it feels as if your heart is being torn into a million pieces, it's still a heart. It still has function. Even if I think it does not have form, it still has function. And I'm grateful for all of the ways that it gets put back together. And as we are moving through this time of change, we ask for the reminders to be ever present. We ask that our eyes, our ears, every nerve ending in our body become more sensitive and more in tune to the messages, the reminders, the memories that are here to show us that hope is still something that each and every single one of us should still create within our consciousness, that grace must be given if it is to be received. Mm. And that what we are going through is just a moment. It's a moment, just like all of the other moments that we have gotten through. This is a moment, and we will have others, and they will look different. And we trust that we will be prepared. Mm. What a beautiful, beautiful experience to have of what was, what is, and at some point, what will be. To be able to have all of that past memories, present memory, and future experiences. What a blessing. And I, for one, am grateful for it. And it keeps me hopeful that even when I cannot create the grace that I so quickly ask for, it is given. It is given. I am, in this moment, excited about what is to come. I know an hour from now, I might be terrified about what is to come. And I'm happy for both of those experiences and everything in between that. And so next week, we are going to talk about grief. Ugh, bring your tissues. So let me say this. In my very limited, but also very extensive experience on grief, it doesn't always have to be sad. Oh my goodness, my eyes are burning now. Doesn't always have to be sad. Doesn't always have to be what we think it is. I know for me, sometimes my grief is very angry, very, very angry. Um, and that's okay. That's okay. And so, come with whatever you feel you can. That is my offer to you for next week. Come with whatever you think you can. And if it is too much, then don't. Because one thing I do know about grief, it doesn't have any rules. And the minute we think that they do, that grief has rules, whew, grief will show you something different. You are so welcome, my love. You are so welcome. And again, thank you all for your flexibility as I am also um, figuring out what my so-called rules of grieving are. Like I said last week, just got hit out of nowhere um, with some information, and it really has caused me to have to recalibrate. However, I also last week got hit with some information, or should I say, some assistance in the most gracious of ways with the evolved community. So, for those of you who have joined, you will see some changes. We're still building the plane while it's in the air. Um, so there'll be some changes there. If you have not joined yet, and I say yet because I know that you will, if you find some value in this space, then you will find, or you will have to find that value in the evolved, because starting in January, I won't be on YouTube anymore. I'll be doing my lives. I'll be doing everything from the evolved community. Um, and so this is how you get there. That is the website. That's how you get there. That's how you join. Again, we are still building the plane while it's in the air. Part of the change in the things that I've been talking about, whew, yikes, in 2025, I'm doing something very, very risky. And so I'll talk more about that when it's time to announce that. Um, but I'm asking in advance for your support, for your prayers, for your guidance, for your wisdom, for whatever it is you feel as though you have to offer. But I literally am jumping without a parachute um, in January, and I'm excited about it. I really, really am. As I said earlier, 2024 was a interesting year, and it was an interesting year. We'll talk more about that in the community, because I always want to share with the community first, um, and so we may be able to do that on Wednesday for reflections at 6. I think I still have it at 6. I may have deleted it, but we'll do that Wednesday night. Um, yeah, I think that's it. I think that's all the announcements that I have so far. I will ask for a um, I am soliciting prayers for my children as they are experiencing what I can only call just their family. Their family that was, and in some ways still is, my family, needs support and love. So just send my girls some good energy because they could certainly use it as well. I love y'all. Thank you so much for tuning in, participating, and supporting this work and all of the work. And I hope that as we move through this week, as we are all changing and becoming different things, that we do so with more grace for ourselves. Please be gentle with yourself this week. I know that this acceleration to get things done before the end of the year and the hustle and bustle of the season might envelop you like a cyclone. Please be gentle with yourself. And if you have to write yourself a reminder and put it on the mirror that says be gentle, then do that. If you have to put it in your phone so that maybe 4 times a day you get an alarm that says be gentle, then do that. Whatever reminder you have to create to be gentle with yourself, please do so. Okay? All right. I love y'all. I love us. I love what we do together. And next week, bring whatever you feel that you need to bring for our conversation on grief. And if you have anything to offer or to add, then hit me up in the Evolve community. There's a chat feature. Say, hey, Can you touch on this as we talk about grief? And I will also be giving resources, things that I have found to be helpful um, on my grief journey that I'm still on. All right. I love y'all. Oop, there we go. Did I send it? Yes. I love you. Have a great rest of your Sunday. Bye, everybody. Be good to yourself.